Hi, everyone, and welcome to the second day of Interact Amsterdam Virtual Conference 2023. We've already had 3 fantastic sessions yesterday and 3 more standing on the agenda today. Up next, we have Soma Ray, who is a UX leader and coach, with a talk Understanding Your Organization's Culture to Inform Your Research Strategy. In this session, Soma will talk about how UX researcher can achieve significant breakthroughs within the organizations by researching and understanding their organization's culture. By researching their org culture, they can find keys that unlock this environmental potential to facilitate collaboration among founders, UX leaders, and function leaders in shaping a shared user-centric vision. Please join in the discussion in the chat. Make sure your chat settings are switched to everyone, not host and panelists, so that everyone can see your messages. If you have any questions, you can submit them using the Q&A function, and I'll get through as many as I can at the end. We are using auto-generated captions from Rev today. There's a chance some of these may get a bit muddled live, as it's the nature of auto-generated captions, but we'll make sure these are tidied up when we post the recordings on our YouTube channel. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Soma to kick things off.
Awesome. Thanks, Manuela. Can you hear me okay?
Perfect.
Okay, awesome. Well, I cannot see the audience member, which is probably one of the downsides of virtual conferences, but whoever has joined, welcome. And I'm glad that you're here, and maybe we can have a really good discussion. So let's kick things right away. One of my favorite memories from a leadership coaching session I had was when the coach told me, Soma, why don't you just use your research hard skills on more than your product space, more than your product problem? Why don't you apply them to understand your organization and your stakeholders? What we were doing was trying to work on this problem of how I can, as a UX leader, measure and demonstrate impact of my research team. This single statement forever became my primary strategy in any problem-solving space. And that is the crux of what I want to share with you all today. While studying our environment and understanding our outputs, which is whatever we produce, and their users, which is our stakeholders or organization, is the key to shaping an impactful strategy. I'll share with you a specific lens of understanding your organization and how that lens's perspective might help you form a research or insight strategy that is cohesive rather than antagonistic. Bear in mind that although I'm speaking from the point of view of a researcher, this applies to a range of functions like product management, design ops, etc. What impact looks like for other roles is not the same as what it means for a user researcher or even a data scientist, for example. This is kind of stating the obvious. Much like product management, research, data analysis, etc., research is an influencer of outcomes, not a producer. Impact for us is reflected in how well a research strategy plays within an organization's culture and is successful by making others succeed. There are so many roads to informing a research strategy. Who do you hire? Which initiatives do you prioritize? Who do you seek out as allies? And what do you measure? In other words, how do you create impact and then tell the story of that impact? To make sure our efforts are best applied, we need to research, in quotes, and understand the workings of our organization, the culture of our organization. This is a question for the audience. In one phrase or in a few words, how would you explain culture? Please feel free to drop it in the chat. There is some universal agreement that culture exists, number one, and number two, that it plays a crucial role in shaping behavior. We'll look at it from the point of view of an organization. But there is little consensus on what organization culture actually is. Let's zero in on some irrefutable facts at least. Culture is consistent, repeatable, and observable patterns of behavior. Like Aristotle said, we are what we repeatedly do. This view elevates repeated behavior or habits as the core of culture and de-emphasizes what people think or believe. If that sounds familiar to you, you're already a researcher at heart because you study behavior first. In large part, culture is also a product of compensation, as said by Alec Haverstick. Culture is powerfully shaped by incentives, monetary rewards, even non-monetary rewards, such as status, recognition, advancement, and also penalties. In other words, the impact that it has on self. So how does one try to understand and synthesize their org culture? There's one option. There is this thing called the Competing Values Framework, which has been developed by Kim Cameron and Robert Quinn at the University of Michigan, a place close to my heart because it's my alma mater. This is a validated research methodology to assess organizational culture. People, like individuals or organizations, can also take what is called as the Organizational Culture Assessment Instrument, or the OCAI, to measure and mark where their organization lies in the framework, in the matrix. This model is based on two key polarities. One is the polarity of stability versus flexibility. And the other is the polarity between a focus on internal happenings versus the external happenings. Please note the competing nature of these polarities. Organizations can do only one thing at a time. For example, if it's a volatile market, an organization is best geared towards being externally focused. Also, if you look at resources, like for example, money, attention, time, organizations can spend these resources only once. So they tend to emphasize one polarity amongst the values. Let's see what these four quadrants are. But before I load that, I would like to ask you, where would you assume your organization falls? Please think about it and put it in the chat. So there is a quadrant called the compete culture or the market culture, and that over-indexes towards being externally focused because it's market-driven, but also over-indexes towards stability and control. Then there's the hierarchical culture or the control culture that over-indexes towards internal focus and prioritizes stability. We have the clan culture where collaboration is key. This is also internally focused, but flexibility is the polarity that they over-index towards. And then there is adhocracy, which is, I think, a mix of the words being ad hoc and democracy. And this really supports a creationist culture, like creating new things. Flexibility and external focus are the primary attributes of this quadrant. Typically, and this is not like hard science, you will see organizations all across the matrix, but typically you will see that tech startups would probably be leaning towards advocacy. Services organizations mostly lean towards market culture. If you're in finance or healthcare where strict control is required, typically they lean towards hierarchical culture. And then if you're in a social impact org, typically they might lean towards a clan culture. This competing value framework helps you see what people value and emphasize when they organize things like their rituals and processes, like activities and priorities. The framework shows whether the framework shows where you are and where you would like to go. Once you can get a handle on your environment, you know your environment, you can start devising your UXR strategy or user research strategy with this added awareness of the foundational context. So let's say Maya is a researcher that can influence impact in this organization that they work in. It's called Food for Good Corporation. It's a sustainable food corporation. And they want to have a highly mature user research practice, as mature as a ripe tomato. Maya finds out about this really cool framework called as the Competing Values Framework. And then they use the OCAI, or the Organizational Culture Assessment Instrument, and survey their organization, their major stakeholders. They collect this data and then get an established understanding of their org culture. They find that food for good is a market-dominant culture. Most of the traits of a market-dominant culture are to be competitive, to be results-oriented, definitely customer-centric, because that's where your differentiation comes from. And leadership and associated sort of shareholders have specific demands. They've already set up their vision and mission very clearly. Maya takes this understanding of the organization's culture and applies it to a specific problem. It could be something as simple as making a stakeholder influencer map, or something really far-reaching, such as growing research maturity. A brief story time interlude. I was in a market culture org a little time ago. The company culture was pretty customer-centric. And this is to be able to gain the competitive advantage in a really crowded e-commerce space, which is a great place for a researcher to be. So I wanted to create a strong, impactful presence for my role straight out of the gate. So I did what typically people might do. I replicated the application of a framework that I had created in the past to make UX research work with agile processes, to be really fast and to be nimble. The North Star goal of this framework that I've created had always been moving impact from doing things in the right way to doing the right thing, which is the what of the framework. What differs is usually the when and the how to meet the goal. There was nothing wrong with the framework in itself, but I made the mistake of applying the same tactics in this current organization that I had successfully applied in my previous organization. But the challenge was the previous organization was an adhocracy. That was a startup model within a huge company, of course, where we were rewarded for risk-taking, innovation, initiative. I was focused on delivering high-risk, high-reward outputs through my framework to keep that innovation going. Coming back, before that, the market culture organization was nothing like that in the current sense, because the culture was very customer-centric and results-oriented. And in this case, big risks meant big investments, but also subsequently big failures. And that would slow progress down. Coming back to food for good, the market culture, Maya technically couldn't afford to make many live experimentation mistakes, as it impacted the customer retention, the basic bottom line. So Maya, who is more sensible than me, adjusted the framework to deliver on iterative continuous testing projects at speed for delivering value in the now, in the present, and then organized like meta-analysis of all of these findings for deeper insights for the future. They basically adjusted to prioritize small frequent wins in the present. Similarly, if Maya was in a hierarchical culture, they would have to adjust their strategies for that and index towards stability, efficiency, and follow rules and policies and boundaries. If they were in a clan culture, they would create strategies that would enhance collaboration, mentorship, participation, and really value the shared opinion and the shared mission that everyone held. So far, so good. And life would be great if things were that easy and singular. But onions have layers, and peel them we must. And so does culture. So let's talk about subcultures then. When the company is smaller or closer to its inception, employees are much closer to the central embodiment of culture because everyone works closely together. However, as a company grows, something magical and organic happens. People bond over common threads of roles, functions, reward systems, or identities, which then start taking the dominant cultural form. As a researcher, this means Maya must now reframe their goal and pursue deeper insights and start to prioritize. Subcultures, for example, are especially relevant to the communication strategy for UX initiatives. Depending on the group they are addressing, Maya might want to have multiple ways of communicating the same outcomes. For example, in a clan culture, workshopping solutions based on insights might work the best. Whereas for hierarchical cultures, an ongoing drip feed of executive summaries might be more impactful. This is where prioritization starts becoming really important. Maya needs to determine which stakeholders need to be heard first, and what might that mean for the long-term user research success strategy. So far, I touched upon the existing state, the present, the here and the now, or as I like to call it, the as-is. But humans have desires, aspirations, and think of the future. After all, we all want growth. If Maya now went on to ask their stakeholders, not only about how things are, the as-is in the present state, but how they want it to be, the to-be, the future state, they will start uncovering an overview of current versus desired culture. Why is this important? For UX roles, we often consider our work to be change agents. For growth and change, it is important to align the strategy with that desired cultural direction, or at least be prepared for the size of the battle you're about to have if that desired strategy has some sort of a potential conflict with the cultural direction. If Maya determines that the future is leaning towards adhocracy, then they can strategically prioritize exploratory projects for uncovering new innovative ideas so more teams can start creating newer things and lean towards it. But how will Maya or we or her organization know that shaping a culture-informed strategy is going to have that intended successful impact or is on the right path? After all, measurement is everything. A good way for Maya to validate their strategies is to measure if the function of research is growing in maturity in the org. Is the buy-in increasing? Is the leadership willing to make more resource investments? Soma Sharon spoke about this model as early as 2012, I think, in which case, if the buy-in in the organization is really high, but there's not enough staff, the idea is it's approaching maturity and you can do more with getting more people in. If there's a big team of researchers or insights synthesizers, insights teams, but the buy-in is low, it's a danger signal because it's probably approaching immaturity. And the holy grail everyone wants to be is in the right topmost quadrant, where you have a good number of people working towards insights and you have a really good buy-in. That's where you're mature. The competing values framework helps us understand the environment and context we ride in. The maturity model helps us measure if the train is on the right track. But what is or are maturity models? Well, that's a conversation we'll save for a whole nother time. They say hindsight is 20/20. So now that you have the bird's eye lens of organizational culture, what is the one thing you would have done differently in the past if you took the time to understand culture? Feel free to drop it in the chat. Thanks. And with that, I'll hand it over to Manuela.
Thank you so much, Soma. So much useful info in there. I really loved how you explained us the competing values framework with based on your own experience from the past and really made it practical. that we could play around, so how to apply it in our own organizations. So I'm checking here if we have any questions coming in. So I would like, when I was listening to you, came to mind, I would love to know from you, who are the main stakeholders to start with interviewing to understand the organizational culture?
That's a good question. So typically what happens is you have to prioritize the goals that you're addressing, right? So imagine a scenario where a researcher is hired as a design researcher. They're closer to the delivery pipeline. They're closer to the product pipeline. In that case, I think the stakeholders of concern would be your product team, your design team, your copy team, the people who are creating things, and those would be your allies in the future. So that is the culture you would want to prioritize to understand. Then depending on the situation the organization in, like let's say if research has to still be evangelized or create a value proposition, then I would say the leadership, the cross-functional leadership team would be a good place to start.
Thank you. Sounds good. I got another question for you. How is the culture changing when there's an organizational change in leadership?
Yeah, that's a good one. So that's what adds another layer to the peeling of the onion, right? This is something that is not a favorite for any UXer to be reactive rather than proactive. But unfortunately, in this situation, you have to be reactive. There might be different ways to handle this. My favorite way is to think that I'm probably joining a new organization, again, off the bat, and then repeat the processes that I would do as I would join a new organization, which is stakeholder interviews, rerun the organization culture assessment with the new leadership, try to get a sense of what their beliefs are. I mean, mission statement might not change because nobody likes to get in the seat of power and change everything right off the bat, but to kind of understand what's driving them, what they are thinking is high risk, high reward, is really important to take into account as well.
Lovely, thank you. At the moment, I don't see any more questions coming in. Is there anything else you want to give the people on the way before we close the session?
Yeah, my only thing would be think of, and this is, I'm probably preaching to the choir, think of your organization and of your stakeholder teams as a service, as a product, and use the skills that you have as a researcher to kind of understand that space, understand that concept, do a little bit of ethnography and take those findings. And the culture assessment is a very good lens to do that.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time, for your talk today, Soma. So that's all
for having me
for now. Thanks to everyone that tuned in. We'll have the recording available for you tomorrow. So keep an eye on your emails when that pops up in your inbox. Our next talk from Ronnie Hendricks, Nomensa's own head of accessibility, is at 2 p.m. Central European time or 1 p.m. UK time. And he will talk about accessibility, the future, and you. I hope we see you back then. Thanks and bye.
Bye.